Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting stuck into a really interesting piece a listener shared called the Suburban Challenge.
Yeah, it's definitely not your standard look at, life outside the city center.
Not at all. It digs into suburban life in a way that connects it to, well, our happiness, our sense of purpose, even bigger global things. Quite surprising, really.
Absolutely. So our plan is to unpack the key ideas from this source, try and figure out what's really going on beneath the surface of this familiar setting.
Okay, so where does it start? It kicks off with a definition of suburban. Well, it's not exactly flattering, is it?
No, not really. It mentions things like inferior manners and narrowness of view. Pretty blunt stuff.
Right. And the author seems to use that negativity almost as a jumping off point. Like, why do people think this way?
Exactly. And it quickly ties into this idea that suburban life often aims for regularity, predictability, comfort and security above all else.
Which sound like good things. Who wouldn't want comfort and security?
Well, yes, but here's the twist the author throws in. Could a life that's almost too comfortable, one lacking significant struggle, or even, maybe, deep hope, could that actually be detrimental?
Detrimental? How so?
Well, detrimental maybe from a bigger perspective. Like, are we missing out on growth or resilience if we're too shielded? The author isn't saying hardship is great, but maybe avoiding it entirely has a hidden cost.
I see. So it's like struggle shapes us in important ways, and if we eliminate it...
We might be eliminating something essential for, I don't know, deeper meaning. That seems to be the implication.
Okay, and that connects to another point they make quite strongly, doesn't it, about privacy?
Oh, yeah. The pressure to keep your problems hidden, your inadequacies and woes, as the text puts it, keep them behind closed doors.
Maintain the perfect image.
Right, and the author calls this a double jeopardy, which is quite a striking phrase.
It is, so what's the double jeopardy?
Well, first, the act of pretending, of denial, is just unhealthy in itself, right? But second, by hiding your struggles, you cut yourself off from potential support, people who might actually help.
So it's not just lonely. It actively prevents you from getting help. It's a cycle.
Precisely. And the author even says this kind of dishonesty can make people hard to be loved and cherished, which is quite a stark observation.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty direct, because real connection needs vulnerability, doesn't it?
Exactly. If you're always putting up a front, how can anyone really connect with the real you?
Okay.
It suggests a kind of hidden emotional isolation.
Okay, so we've got the potential downsides of too much comfort and this pressure to hide imperfections. What's next? Money.
Yes, the classic pursuit of more money. The source mentions research, and this isn't new, showing that once your basic needs are covered, getting richer doesn't actually make people much happier, at least not in the West.
Right, we've heard that before. The happiness curve flattens out.
But here's the thing. When you ask people what would improve their lives, what do they usually say?
More money. Overwhelmingly.
Exactly. And the author flags this as another form of denial, a denial about what truly brings fulfillment.
So the idea is maybe we're focusing so hard on getting more stuff, more money, that we're kind of distracting ourselves.
That seems to be the argument. Distracting ourselves from perhaps deeper needs connection, meaning purpose that money can't buy after a certain point. It questions the core values driving that lifestyle.
Okay, which then leads to a tricky situation for institutions like, say, the church or other community groups.
Yeah, how do they challenge this culture of, denial and keeping up appearances, especially in more affluent areas where they might get a lot of their support?
It's risky, isn't it? The author notes they could alienate people, especially if the institution itself seems pretty comfortable.
Right. And the observation that it often feels safer or more acceptable to speak up on behalf of the poor than it is to confront the mainstream culture, that really hits home.
It highlights a real tension. You need the support, but you also want to challenge potentially unhelpful cultural norms.
And that comparison the author makes, suburban theology seeming a little sad next to urban and liberation theology, it suggests a less challenging, maybe less impactful approach sometimes.
And the joke about hyacinth bucket theology.
Yeah, keeping up appearances.
Yeah.
It's a light touch, but it makes a sharp point about priorities appearances versus maybe deeper spiritual or ethical questions.
Okay, so then the author gets personal, which I thought was quite effective.
Sharing their own examples of using wealth for comfort and security, creating what they call a playpen existence.
Yeah, and the examples are so relatable, aren't they? Not wanting to be cold, getting annoyed by having to change TV channels manually.
The package holidays, Relying on the car for everything, popping pills for minor aches.
Yeah.
It's a list many of us would recognize bits of, I think.
Definitely. It grounds the whole discussion. It's not just pointing fingers. The author includes themselves.
And that's key, I think. It shows how these small, everyday comforts, taken together, can build up into a way of life that actively shields us from the raw and abrasive aspects of life, as they put it.
Setting the stage for the bigger consequences.
Exactly. Consequences that are maybe huge and rarely acknowledged.
Which leads into this idea of the cross being taken out of life. That's a powerful image.
It is. And they use Michael Ignatieff's observations about elderly people isolated in a London market while their kids are out in the suburbs.
Right. So even if the state provides support, that direct human connection, the face-to-face stuff, the generative stories with strangers, that gets lost.
Yeah. We become, in the author's framing, both the Samaritan providing aid through taxes or systems and the priest and Levite who walk by on the other side, avoiding the messy, direct encounter.
Wow. That's quite an image. The unintended consequence of separation.
We might be doing good impersonally, but we miss the humanizing effect of direct engagement. The author suggests this actually impoverishes us, our empathy, our understanding.
Okay, but what about the interactions suburban people do have with those facing difficulties, like with teachers or nurses, social workers?
Good point. The author addresses that, but highlights the power dynamic. In those professional roles, there's usually an imbalance of power.
Ah, so it's not an encounter between equals.
Right. And that, the author argues, limits the transformational potency of being without power in an encounter. You don't experience that vulnerability yourself.
And this ties into that underlying anxiety the author mentions, that feeling of, I've got things under control, but I still feel anxious.
Exactly. It's a paradox.
Yeah.
A controlled life, yet a persistent low-level anxiety. Maybe it comes from knowing deep down that the control is partly an illusion and we're avoiding something.
Avoiding what, though?
Well, this is where the author brings in Ernest Becker, the denial of death.
Okay, big concept.
Huge. The idea is that our fundamental primary repression in modern Western society isn't sex, it's the awareness that we're going to die.
And this is fueled by narcissism and science reducing us from having souls to just selves.
That's Becker's argument, as presented here.
Yeah.
We feel uniquely important, yet science tells us we're just biological organisms destined to decay. Becker's quote about being split in two, aware of our specialness, but also that we'll rot and disappear.
It's a terrifying dilemma. Yeah, I can see that.
So the suggestion is that much of our culture, including the drive for comfort and security in suburbia, is a defense mechanism against this core existential dread.
Trying to build walls against the inevitable.
In a way, yes. Creating distractions, illusions of permanence.
And then auto rank comes in, adding another layer. The idea that appearing normal, healthy, and happy might just mean you're really good at denial.
Yes. Good at denial and self-deception. The author explicitly links this skill for denial to the suburban disease.
So the more perfect things look on the surface,
The more depth the denial might be underneath. It really makes you question that relentless pursuit of normalcy. Is it authentic?
is it healthy, even if it looks it?
That's the challenging question, isn't it? Is this carefully built normality actually a way of avoiding deeper truths?
Then comes that really shocking Becker quote about normal, average men laying waste to the world to forget themselves.
It's incredibly strong language. A powerful indictment?
And the link made to anticipatory obedience.
Not
It's chilling.
It is. The idea that our own anxiety and insecurity make us want to please authority, sometimes to the point of doing harmful things without even being explicitly ordered to. The Nazi example is the extreme, obviously.
But the modern version is presented as like workplace pressure, showing initiative that just happens to align perfectly with what management wants.
Yeah, a subtle conformity driven by that same underlying anxiety and need for approval. It's a sobering connection to make, the potential dark side of wanting to fit in and feel secure.
So if that's the problem, this anxiety-driven conformity, what's the path out?
Well, the author points to depth psychology, thinkers like Jung, his idea of individuation.
Becoming your own person, essentially, thinking for yourself, acting authentically.
Right. But it's presented as difficult, a daring venture, because it means risking isolation, stepping away from the safety of the herd,
Makes sense. It's scary to stand out.
But here's an interesting angle from Becker, Kierkegaard, William James. They suggest that faith, a belief in something beyond the self, can actually support this process.
How so?
It provides a different kind of grounding. Not the isolating heroic individualism, but a sense of connection to something larger that gives you the courage to be yourself. A godly supported individuation, as the author later puts it.
Okay, so faith as a framework for becoming a true individual, not just conforming or going it alone entirely.
That seems to be the idea, a
Yeah.
balance.
And this connects back to community ministry. How does that fit in?
It's presented not just as charity, but as a practical way to live out this individuation. By engaging with others, creating story-rich lives through real experiences, you differentiate yourself from the crowd.
And it combats that despair Becker talked about, the need for self-stimulation by movement.
Exactly. Taking action, getting involved, especially in ways that are partly self-forgetful because you're focused on others, it's a way to move beyond internal anxieties. It offers, quote, therapy for those overly shielded lives.
Taking risks within limits and with a structure of support. That sounds manageable.
Yeah, it's not about throwing yourself into chaos unprepared, but about structured ways to encounter difference and challenge.
But then there's that anecdote, the church member wishing there were more homeless people nearby for them to help.
Right. It perfectly illustrates the problem. In some comfortable suburban areas, the opportunities for those direct, challenging encounters are just scarce.
So the ministry has to be more intentional. Look further afield sometimes.
That's the implication. You might need to actively seek out those encounters, maybe engage with issues that aren't right on your doorstep.
Which brings us to the GP in West London example, setting up the microcredit scheme in the Philippines.
Yeah, a great example. The money helped? Sure. But the author stresses the principle of obliquity.
Meaning the main benefit wasn't the intended one?
Kind of. The really powerful thing was the unexpected impact on the sponsors when they were invited to visit Manila. That experience of sticking their necks out, feeling overwhelmed.
That created the thin places, moments of real spiritual awareness or breakthrough.
That's how the author frames it. The direct encounter, the vulnerability, did something profound that just sending money couldn't achieve. It changed them.
Okay, that makes sense. Then the discussion shifts gears a bit to the experience economy.
Right. Pine and Gilmore's idea that we're moving beyond selling goods to selling experiences.
And the connection is, suburbanites might have enough stuff, but they still crave experiences.
Precisely. But there's a warning. Are these experiences just more sophisticated distractions? Are they trivial, addictive, designed not to challenge our self-image? Echoing auto rank again.
Like the Honda ad example using deep-sounding philosophy to sell a car.
Exactly. The author calls it Philistine behavior, drawing on Kierkegaard. Using the trivial to soothe ourselves because we're afraid of the full horizon of experience, the really deep stuff.
So experiences can be just another form of avoidance if we're not careful.
That's the danger highlighted. But there's also an opportunity.
An opportunity? How?
Well, if people are seeking engaging, personalized experiences, maybe that makes things like, well, meaningful church involvement or participation in events that foster those generative stories more appealing now.
So the church could potentially offer the kind of deep, personalized experience people are looking for. Spiritual direction is mentioned as an example.
Exactly. Something personalized, memorable, and potentially transformative, not just superficial. But, as Goethe apparently said, you need both the experience and the reflection on it. Just collecting experiences isn't enough.
Right. Need to plunge in, but also step back and understand.
Otherwise, it stays superficial.
So wrapping things up, getting involved in this kind of community ministry, the kind that involves vulnerability and maybe feeling overwhelmed, the author calls it class treason.
Yeah, strong term again. Treason against that comfortable playpen lifestyle. Because it challenges the core values of seeking comfort and control above all else.
So the ultimate goal isn't just helping others, it's actually transforming the culture of suburbia itself.
That seems to be the ambitious aim. Offering an alternative that's attractive and meaningful, but without making people immediately defensive. A tough balance.
And the payoff potentially is this cascade of grace that the author describes.
Yes, this series of positive changes that can ripple outwards from encountering vulnerability, even indirectly.
Let's quickly recap those. Hearts getting moistened, less self-interest, more compassion.
Seeing the dignity and resilience in others beyond our own norms.
Recognizing sin as something systemic, not just personal mistakes.
And seeing how institutions, even good ones, tend to protect insiders.
Achieving deep literacy, understanding how power works, questioning common sense.
And finally, realizing that everyone is vulnerable, breaking through that illusion of security, leading to more honesty.
It's quite a profound potential outcome, isn't it?
It really is. It suggests these encounters can fundamentally change how we see ourselves and the world.
So, as we finish up, maybe the thought to leave you, the listener, with is this. How might your own understandable desire for comfort and security be, perhaps inadvertently, shielding you?
Yeah, shielding you from experiences or understandings that could actually be really valuable, even if they're uncomfortable.
What's one small step you could take, maybe this week, to just stick your neck out a tiny bit, to engage with something a bit more raw, even in a world that feels pretty managed?
Definitely something to mull over.
Indeed. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.